Today, we're quitting our jobs, all right? Not just to lay around on the couch and watch television reruns, no, but quitting our jobs specifically to pursue our music careers or any other alternative career for that matter, full time. So obviously, I'm not advising you to just run out without any thought and quit your job. That is not the purpose of this video. But in this video, I want to share my story and the thoughts and the emotions that I went through when I was deciding whether or not to quit my job to do music full time. Now, this is obviously a big decision and not one to be taken lightly. So unless you've gone through this yourself, you might not be in touch with a lot of the fear, anxiety, and emotions that go along with it. So since I've been through it, I thought I would share my experience, which hopefully could help you. Also, I want to discuss some of the things you can do to prepare. And a lot of these are from mistakes that I made. So I want to share things that I wish I'd done differently and hopefully help you make the best decision possible if you are at this crossroads like I was. Spoiler alert, I quit the comfort of my day job about 24 years ago. And now that it's been some time, obviously, do I regret it? No, I don't regret it. So it was early 2001 and I was in my mid-20s working full-time as an IT consultant and also as a full-time employee at an asset management company. And this was right on 57th Street and Madison Avenue, right in the heart of the finance industry in Midtown Manhattan. A very good job, I must say, for a young punk like me at the time. And it paid really well. But there was one big problem. I was miserable. You see, I was a gigging musician on the side, okay, as a solo acoustic act and in an original band that I had. And I was also doing recordings for both myself and for clients in a small studio that I had put together in my mom's basement. You see, I had taken some of that money that I was making and I invested it in some good recording music equipment. Well, I found it really difficult to schedule clients, to schedule gigs, and even just to have the energy after a long day of work to make music or to schedule my life, because my job was very, very demanding. And let's say I had a gig scheduled at night, or a rehearsal scheduled, or a client scheduled at 8 p.m. and the computer system crashed. Well, guess what? You weren't leaving. You were staying until the job was done. These people were paying you. They were paying you well. And you were theirs. And that's not right or wrong. That's just the way it was. So I had no control over the independent part of my life or the music business part of my life. Okay, so that's part one, aspect one. But the other thing is that I really just hated the daily rat race. Getting up at the crack of dawn, getting on the subway in the winter, right? Or if I drove to work, sitting in, an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours of traffic just to go 8 miles into Manhattan, right? And it was the idea of doing the same thing every single day, other than your 2 weeks or 3 weeks that you got for vacation. It just started to feel like at 26 that my life was just starting to tick by, and this was going to be all that it was going to be. The same routine every day, going to the same office, seeing the same people, not being able to fully pursue my music, which was what was in my heart, my freedom and my music. My hairline was already thinning, so here I was looking at the future of being a 40-year-old bald guy. And I felt like just my opportunity to do what I wanted was shrinking. I felt like I was getting old. And if I didn't make the change and pursue a life where I was going to be able to live my days doing what I wanted, I felt like if I didn't do it then, that window was closing and I would never be able to do it. Now, that was not correct. You could always make a change. But that was my thought at the ripe old age of 26. So an interesting thing happened once I really started to seriously entertain the fact in my mind that I could, in fact, quit my job. I mean, whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, the truth is you can do it. And once you entertain the idea of it, it became exciting and it scared the crap out of me all at the same time. On one hand, I was elated about the idea of the promise of it, about the idea of living every day the way I wanted to. But I was also scared of letting go of the certainty of a steady paycheck and letting go of the correct path, which was to have a good job and make good money and all the things that you grow up learning that you're supposed to do, right? Am I making the right decision? I was torn. I had two voices kind of in my head speaking to me, right? The practical voice was telling me that I was leaving a job where I could make great money, where down the road I could make even more money if I just stayed there. And then there was the other voice telling me, you only get one life and time is always ticking away and you're getting older every day. And ultimately, you would never have a chance to do it over. And that you may regret one day that you never tried to pursue your own path in life. Now, you know what they say, that hindsight is 20/20. So if I had to do over again, what would I do differently? Well, first, let's talk about some things you should probably consider before you make the decision to quit your job. Now, you may think number one would be, do you have money saved? And we'll get into that. But the first thing I would consider is, have you made any money yet in your music career or your side hustle career? And if so, how much money have you made for the time that you've spent on your craft? Are you out there giving lessons maybe on your instrument where you're making X amount of dollars? Are you, in my case, I had a recording studio and I was booking time for clients and making X amount of dollars per hour. And I was able to consider what was that tipping point where if I had more available time from not being at my day job, how much more money could I book out in my music career? Another thing was I was going out at night and playing gigs for money. And because I would not have a day job anymore, perhaps I could take gigs on nights of the week that ordinarily I wouldn't take gigs because I wouldn't have to worry about it interfering with my job. Also, I wouldn't have to cancel gigs and events that I had planned because my job needed me at the last minute. So I was able to factor in the amount of money that I was already making with my music jobs and see how that stacked up against the money I was making at my regular job. And I was able to see what that tipping point was between the amount of time that my regular job used up and how much that was costing me on the music side. So it's kind of like a balancing act. But you definitely want to consider, have you proven yet that you could actually make money with your chosen music path? A good idea would be, and I did not do this, so this is something you could learn from my mistakes. A good idea would be to keep a logbook maybe for like 2 or 3 months of the work that you're booking and the money that you're making. Because remember, when you give up that day job, that steady paycheck, you don't necessarily know exactly how much money you're going to make when you work for yourself. So if you keep a logbook for a few months, I mean, the longer the better. If you could do it for a year, depending on how long you want to prepare for this, you can get a really good idea of how much money you can forecast that you're going to make based on how your schedule is. So if you know your calendar is booked up X amount, you could look back at your past earnings in your logbook and have an idea of how much money you're going to earn in the future, which will help you kind of alleviate some of the uncertainty of not having a steady paycheck. Something I didn't do, something I wish I would have done. And I actually didn't start doing that until many years later, but it helps if you work for yourself. Keep a log of the money you make. This way, you can plan what you might be making in the future. And also it's going to help you when it comes time to do your taxes at the end of the year. Because remember now, you're not going to be working on a W-2, okay? You're going to have to keep track of all the money you make, all the different various maybe 1099s that you make, and hand that off to your accountant. Your taxes are going to be more complicated as well. Another thing, and this may seem obvious, but it wasn't so much to me as a young kid, make sure you have an idea of like what your fixed costs are. A lot of these advice hacks here are really just basic financial advice, all right? You want to make sure you know what your fixed costs are. Are you living at home? Are you paying rent? What are your debts? Do you have credit card debt? If so, you might want to try to eliminate any unnecessary costs, because you want as long a runway in front of you as possible to secure yourself, because those bills are not going to stop coming just because you quit your job, okay? You are now accustomed to having a steady paycheck, and once you quit your job, you're not going to have that, okay? So any costs that you don't need, get rid of. Pay off all of your debt. Are you in a car lease? I was in a car lease, and you don't realize just how quickly that payment comes up every single month, okay? Because you've been used to having that steady money every week or every 2 weeks hitting your bank account. That's done once you quit your job, okay? You're now on your own. You have to make sure you're going to earn that money to pay those bills. So whatever bills you don't absolutely need, get rid of. If I had it to do over again, I would have turned in my lease early, or I would have waited for my car lease to be finished before I quit my job. And I would have bought a car that was way less expensive and just lived way below my means during that transition period while having as much money saved as I possibly could. That's a mistake I made. Do not make that mistake. Speaking of money saved, and this is probably the most blaringly obvious thing there is, you should have as much money saved as you possibly can. I mean, that goes for, I guess life in general, but because you want to make sure you have, I've used this phrase already, but a long runway. Okay, that plane is, you're starting a new business and that plane is running down the runway trying to take off. And if you run out of runway, i.e. money, you're crashing right into the ocean. Okay, so I would say, this is going to sound crazy. I mean, the more the better. If you had like 2 years of living expenses saved up, that would be a really nice cushion. That might be a little bit too much to ask. But, the more money you have saved, the better, because those bills are going to keep coming in, and you want to make sure that you're not freaking out when they do, that you have the money to cover it. Another big mistake I made. Yes, I had money saved when I did this transition. I had a significant amount of money saved. But the stupidest thing I ever could have done, and now 25 years later I look back at it and I do the math and it makes me cringe, I cashed out my 401k plan that I had. I had a company that had matched my 401k and I had contributed to it, and maybe at the time it was, $30,000, okay? That $30,000 over 25 years would be worth a heck of a lot more now. If I pulled out a compound interest calculator and did the numbers at, let's say, at 8% return, I probably would have quadrupled that money in that amount of time, maybe more. So that was a very, very big mistake I made. So if you have a company IRA or a company 401k that you've contributed to, do not use that money to make this transition. Absolutely not. Roll that money into another, retirement or tax deferred account. Okay? Do not use that money. Do not use that money. Do not use that money. That money doesn't exist. Okay. Another thing to consider, health coverage. I had a transitional health coverage when I left my job. Back then it was Cobra. I don't know if they still have Cobra. Also, it's a little bit easier now to get health coverage if you are on a lesser income. Okay, a lot has changed in the healthcare world since then, and you could get coverage now. Back then, for me, it was a lot different. You couldn't just get health coverage, okay? So just make sure you have an idea of what your game plan is, all right? Have a game plan for your health coverage, because the last thing you want to do is leave your job and then, God forbid, something happens. You break a bone or you get sick. Anything can happen, and then that throws you into a financial situation that you didn't plan for right when you're at the beginning of building your new business or your new music business. The other thing I would recommend, and I guess I did this halfway decent, maybe not, is really take your time about this and be fair to your employer. Don't just walk out the door on them, okay? Give them a fair amount of notice. I know in today's environment, there's a little bit less of that allegiance, let's just say, to your employer. There's less of that commitment where people kind of quit with much less notice nowadays, as far as I know. But, be fair. You might be leaving your employer in a situation where they're a little bit compromised. Don't worry. They'll find a solution to replace you. Everyone's replaceable. So you have to do what's best for you. And if you determine that moving on with your life is best for you, then do it. I did it. I don't regret it. Okay, there were tough times throughout those years, but a lot of those tough times were caused by me. Not because I quit my job, but because I was young and I had a lot of lessons to learn. So I caused more hardships for myself than I needed to. If I had planned it a little bit better, that might not have been the case. But remember, you could plan all you want. Sometimes life just throws you a curveball, all right? So it is what it is when it comes to that. So I hope these tips and the mindset that I experienced could help you at least have some understanding that there's other people out there who have gone through this and know how it feels, and maybe you could learn from some of my mistakes that I made. I'm Frank Persico. I hope to see you in the next video. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day. Take care.